What's up, guys? Make it stick. Another day. Let's get into it. Oops. All right, we're going to Anki. Like always, we start with Anki to see if we have any flashcards. Why is my fingerprint not working? There we go. Let's go. Anki flashcards. No flashcards for Make It Stick today. Okay. What did we do yesterday then? Well, I don't even remember, dude. I feel like we would have read about interleaved practice. Yeah? Interleaved practice. Well, the day before, I think, yeah, that wasn't yesterday that we did the intro paragraph to chapter 3, as well as space reps, as well as the myth of mass practice. Yesterday would have been interleaved practice. Did we just read the section on interleaved practice and then maybe start varied practice? Maybe. Interleaved practice is basically mixing up practice. You know, like mixing in different subjects in between repetitions or studies, sessions or concepts, or similarly related or not similarly related subjects and skills. It's a vague abstract idea, but really it's just mixing up your practice, not doing one thing over and over again. Right. Yeah, you do mix them up. So we read about a study in which high schoolers or undergraduates, I don't remember. I don't know if it clarified, but they learned how to find the volumes of these abstract geometric shapes. One group, so there's 4 abstract geometric shapes they're going to find the volume of. The first group did all 4 of the first type, then all 4 of the second type, then all 4 of the third type, then all 4 of the fourth type. The other group, however, interleaved them. So they did the first one, well, they did one of the first, then one of the second, then one of the third, then one of the fourth, and then they just looped that 4 times or something like that. They randomly mixed them up. This group, we're going to do all of the first geometric shape, then we're going to do all of the second until we get it right, or do them all, and then the next, and then the next, right? This is typically how math textbooks are structured. One concept, and then the next concept, and the next concept. Okay, so how did they fare? Well, after the first day where they learned it, what are the results? So the group that mass practiced actually got an 89% overall correct rate, or correct answers. Really good, right? Nearly 100%, so 89%, really good. Compared to the interleaved group, worse, 60%. You're like, oh, what? I thought interleaved practice was supposed to be better than mass practice. What do we think? Well, wait a second. Let's retest them now a week later. What happens? 1 week later, the group that got an 89%, the group that mastered their practice, what did they get? They got a 20%, right? They nearly forgot 5x of what they, or what would that be? 80%? About 75%. No, about 80%. I think they forgot most of what they learned. They went from 89% to 20%. What about the interleave group? Well, they went from 60%, remember. What did they get? They didn't forget anything. In fact, they got better. They got 63%. So interleave practice leads to more reliable, stable knowledge that actually improves over time as your brain processes it. Whereas mass practice, quick learning, really quick forgetting as well. Okay. So the takeaway of the section is interleave practice is more effective than mass practice for long-term learning and retention, right? We're defining learning as we've defined it in the past. I'm not going to do it again. I'm just going to check what we forgot here. So we got into we got into varied practice, but let's check interleave practice. Short-term gains that don't last for mass practice. Ah. All right, so basically, Interleaved practice feels slower than mass practice. Mass practice feels more productive. You see the great gains. Interleaved, it feels more effortful. It feels like you're forgetting stuff. It feels worse. And that's why interleaved practice is rarely used. It's counterintuitive, but in reality, it leads to better learning. There you go. So that's a huge benefit from learning this book, that you'll never use interleaved practice unless by accident, because it doesn't feel as productive, but it is in the long term. It's much more productive in the long term. Okay, varied practice. What do we read about varied practice? So varied practice leads to improved, right? We only got through like the first paragraph and a half. So varied practice is basically mixing up your practice with like different variations of the thing you're learning. So maybe if you're practicing a musical piece, it's faster or it's slower, or you start at different spots in the piece, that kind of stuff. Where it's the same idea, but you're mixing it up and making it different. And rather than interleaving where you're just interleaving different concepts in general, this varied practice is the same concept, but it's a different variation of the concept. And it appears to work for all forms of learning, including motor and knowledge-based learning. And it leads to an increased ability to apply the concept or skill you're learning in more creative and novel situations. Okay? So now we're going to continue reading varied practice, and I'll be back with recall in a minute. All right, guys, I just read the rest of that section on varied practice, so there's a lot to take in. Let's start doing it. So, varied practice leads to developing a more nuanced and a more flexible, that is, you can apply it more easily in new situations, knowledge than mass practice. By nuanced, I mean it's more, you understand more of the context dependencies, what changes in different contexts, its intricacies in different contexts, etc. What makes, just like interleaved practice, it leads to more nuanced and flexible mental representation / knowledge. Cool. In athletics, mass practice has long been the norm, the gospel, but we are starting to get more and more evidence to say that it's not effective, not as effective as varied practice. Varied practice has been shown to literally, with new neuroimaging studies, it has been shown to develop mental representations in brain regions that are literally different than the brain regions associated with learning from mass practice. The brain regions that varied practice lead to developing the mental representations in are brain regions associated with, for example, motor skills that are, let me restart this. Word salad. For motor skill learning, if you use varied practice or if you use mass practice, where the mental representation is developed and stored is literally different. For practice that is varied, the mental representation is formed and developed within a brain region associated with more complex and higher order motor skills, compared to mass practice, in which the mental representations are developed in a brain region associated with more simpler, less nuanced motor skills. And because of this, these varied practice, because of this, or maybe not, but correlation or causation aside, the mental representations formed from varied practice are more flexible, more nuanced, and the mental representations developed from mass practice are less flexible, less nuanced, and literally in different brain regions. So you're saying with simpler motor skills, and this is probably from the extra effort, the effortfulness, and the more complexity of like how it's more dynamic in the practice. Okay, literally different brain regions. And then what else we got about varied practice? There's more. We talked about the athletes, or the athletic training. We talked about, right, the final part is basically that a recent study has shown that or studies have been showing that varied practice is more effective for cognitive learning just like it is for motor skill learning. So the study was about a study on anagrams. One group basically practiced one anagram, one group practiced variations of the anagram. They were tested on the group that are on the anagram that the one group practiced, whereas the other group did a bunch of other variations, just like the beanbag experiment. And just like the beanbag experiment, the varied group performed better on the anagram that this other group literally only practiced, nothing else. So that context dependency, the more nuanced the more nuanced perspective, the more nuanced context dependencies, different brain regions, this all leads to more flexible, better learning, more durable. Maybe not more, probably more durable, but didn't really talk about that. Just in general, more nuanced, more easily applicable in novel situations and applied creatively. Cool? All right, that's varied practice. I already wrote what the section was about. The next section All right, now we're into the section about developing discrimination skills. So as always, I'll write down what is the section about. We've got 2 minutes and 15 seconds, so I will go ahead and read about a paragraph and call it good for the day. So I'll talk to you in a sec. Wrapping up for the day, guys. The alarm just went off. So basically, interleaved and varied practice lead to this developing this ability to discriminate between context scenarios, discern between what type of problem, what type of thing is this. And we talked about this in one of the claims the authors make. It's one of the claims that interleaved and varied practice leads to an ability to discern between contexts and different what makes one thing different from another, the underlying principles between them. So discrimination and discerning principles. They talked about a little example of how math textbooks are like masked, and then you just mask these problems, then you go to the next chapter, you mask those problems, and you go to the next chapter, mask those problems, on you march. Then the final exam, it's all mixed up, and you're like, what do I do? And so to actually develop knowledge that's practical and applicable and valuable, we need to develop discerning and discrimination skills. So that's it for today. I'll talk to you guys later. See ya.